After 5 long years of jealousy keeping my son from me, an incredible cake revealed a hidden truth. David stood in his small, cluttered kitchen, the aroma of chocolate and vanilla swirling around him like a cloud of nostalgia. As a chemistry teacher, he had spent years mixing chemicals, calculating formulas, and predicting reactions. Yet, now he faced a far more complicated reaction: the distance between himself and his son, Jake. Each whisk stirred not just the batter, but also memories of better times, a time where laughter echoed and father-son bonding flourished. Guilt clawed at his insides. Why couldn't he be the father Jake needed? He poured the batter into a mold shaped like a beaker, carefully mixing colors for the icing, each hue delicately representative of elements he once explained with passion in the classroom. Yet, every swirl was tinged with apprehension. What if his son didn't care? What if this cake, meant to be a bridge, became just another reminder of what was lost? The pressure mounted. At this moment, he was not just creating a cake, he was crafting a lifeline, a chance to reconnect amidst a chaotic swirl of ex-wives and miscommunication. As he piped icing onto the cake, he could almost hear his ex-wife's voice in his head. Those biting remarks about his parenting, the jealousy that had fractured their family, the doubts about his worthiness as a father. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As days crept by, anticipation wrestled with anxiety. The cake was more than dessert. It was an embodiment of his hope, of a dream for reconnection. Yet, what if Jake hated it? Would the masterpiece crumble in front of everyone, making David feel small, powerless? The tension grew like baking dough, expanding but pushing against the constraints of his own insecurities. Family gatherings had always been a minefield, the laughter of others ringing in his ears like a taunt, his isolation palpable against the backdrop of their joy. But what if this was the moment? Arriving at the bake sale, David's heart raced. There it was, his cake, standing proud and imposing. And then he saw Jake. Initially, Jake's eyes lit up, a flicker of surprise dancing across his face. But before David could relish that small victory, his ex-wife arrived. Her presence slipped in like a shadow, casting doubt over the moment. She scoffed at the cake, making a dismissive comment that pierced through the festive air. David felt the rush of betrayal and anger. It was as if she had grabbed a knife and sliced through the hope he desperately clung to. Moments felt eternal, the atmosphere thick with unresolved tension, like scientists measuring a reaction right before the explosion. Just then, a figure emerged, a tall man with a familiar gait, David's estranged father. The surprise began to morph into dread. Secrets fluttered in the air, stories of past bitterness poised to surface amid the chaos. David's hands trembled, and his heart thudded loudly. What would this mean? Could he address the lingering resentment and silence? The air crackled with unresolved tensions, and it became painfully clear. The cake was not the only thing at stake. Would they confront the tangled web of hopes, disappointments, and revelations that had defined their lives? With the weight of 2 generations pressing down, David stood at a precipice, the moment charged and alive. What lies ahead was both haunting and exhilarating, both a challenge and a chance for redemption. Would they mold new memories from the bitter remnants of the past, or would the ghosts of yesterday shatter this fragile moment? The answer hung in the air, pregnant with possibility, but terrifying in its uncertainty. David's breath caught as he locked eyes with his father, emotions swirling like the colors on his cake. This wasn't merely the uncomfortable reunion of 2 estranged family members. This was a reckoning laden with years of unresolved conflict. The sight of the man responsible for decades of silence, abandonment, and guilt made David question every choice that had led him here. The festival buzz around him faded into a dull roar, drowning out the laughter and chatter of passing families. David could feel the weight of expectations festering beneath the surface, a pressure to not only confront his father, but to redefine himself in front of his son, Jake. Where did the hurt end, and where did opportunity begin? Each heartbeat echoed in his ears, urging him to choose his next words carefully. The stakes had never felt higher. "Dad," David managed, his voice uneven, as though he were cracking an awkward chemical bond. Each syllable was forged in years of frustration and regret. His father smirked, as if amused by the forced formality. That smirk ignited a rush of anger within David, an uncontrollable urge to crush it, both literally and figuratively. This was not the time for feigned pleasantries. "Surprised to see you're not teaching chemistry anymore." The words dripped with sarcasm. In that moment, David realized he was now in a position to challenge his father's disparagement. "I'm teaching something much more important," he asserted, struggling to keep his voice steady. Everything he had created for Jake depended on this confrontation, on showing his son that family bonds could be more profound than flesh and blood. "Baking cake? What's next? Knitting?" His father scoffed, but David refused to let that ridicule take root. This was his turning point. He had held back too much for far too long. "You wouldn't understand," David retorted, his eyes darting over to Jake, who stood by the cake, a silent witness to this emotional chemistry experiment. Did he see his father as weak, or could he sense the storm brewing within him? Moving forward, David stepped closer to the cake. "This cake symbolizes new beginnings, Dad. This isn't just about flour and sugar. It's about reconciling the past, about reconnecting with my son. Can't you see that?" Jake's eyes widened, perhaps for the first time recognizing the vulnerability of his father's stance. A faint glimmer of respect emerging from years of neglect. David felt a flicker of belief ignite. Maybe this confrontation, could usher in a new understanding, not just between him and his father, but between him and Jake. But his father's laughter cut through the air like a shattering glass. The bitterness was palpable. "You think a cake can fix what's broken? You're a fool if you believe that." David's anger surged. He had taught so many students the importance of persisting through failure. Now, faced with his father's cynicism, he felt the tug of something deeper, the desire to confront not only his father, but his own insecurities as a man and a parent. Maybe it's not just about the cake. Maybe it's about learning to try again, even when the odds are stacked against you. Maybe it's about showing Jake that it's okay to speak up and make mistakes. Could he turn this into a teachable moment, pushing through the layers of pain towards something transformative? But before he could respond further, Jake stepped closer, his youthful voice breaking the tension. "Dad, what are we doing here?" David's heart raced. Was this his moment to pull back from the edge? To show his son that life was about confronting fears, however uncomfortable? Or would his father's cruelty push David back into a shell, risking everything he had fought for? As glances were exchanged and layers of history began to unfurl, David sensed that this confrontation held potential beyond a mere family reunion. It could ignite his path to self-discovery, but he had to act. The emotional glass was filled to the brim, and what would spill over next was uncertain. David took a breath, surveyed the scene. He was ready to confront not just his father, but also the fears that had always held him hostage. The moment of truth beckoned. Would he gain the strength to face both his father and the mistakes of the past? Or would he retreat into doubt, losing not only Jake's respect, but also his chance at redemption? With renewed resolve building inside him, David prepared to speak. The atmosphere crackled with tension, promising revelations and conflicts still to come. The moment hung heavy, suspended in the air as David absorbed Jake's question. Each second felt like an eternity, and he sensed the essence of their relationship teetering between the need to protect and to educate. Should he explain his emotions to Jake or shield him from the rawness of this confrontation? This was no ordinary lesson about ingredients or measurements. Life was more unpredictable and complex. "Jake," David's voice remained steady, though his heart hammered in his chest. "We're here to face the truth, not just about this cake, but about family, about what it means to be a father and son." He glanced at his father's face, still smeared with a mocking grin. "It's about accountability and honesty, and it's about charting our own course." His father rolled his eyes, a gesture that used to cut at David's self-worth like a knife. He fought against the urge to back down, recognizing this as a pivotal moment not only for himself, but for Jake. He would model what courage looked like. "What do you want from me, David?" the man sneered, crossing his arms defiantly. "A pat on the back for playing house with frosting?" "Not a pat," David shot back, the fire rekindling within him. "Just respect for trying. I'm doing my best to be a better father than you were." Each word was weighted with both defiance and an almost desperate need for acceptance. In that moment, he felt as if he were standing on the precipice of change. Was he trying to convince his father, or was this more for Jake's sake? The answer was both. "Listen, Dad," David continued, redirecting his focus back to his son. "This cake isn't just a dessert, it's a lesson. When you bake, you make mistakes. Sometimes the batter doesn't rise, or the flavors clash, but you can always start again. That's what I want you to see." "But it's still just cake," Jake said, confusion marring his young features. "Does this really mean something?" "Yes, it does," David pressed, willing desperately to draw his son into this moment. "It's about more than baking. It's about transformation, turning something that didn't work out into something beautiful. Just like people can change, grow, and reconnect." The words seemed to penetrate through Jake's confusion, and David could see a flicker of understanding in his son's expression. In that moment, their bond solidified against the backdrop of a long-awaited confrontation. His father interjected, indignant. "So you think you can fix this with a few heartfelt words and some flour, huh?" The dismissive tone reeked of cynicism, but also ignited something deeper within David. "No," he replied firmly, finding newfound strength surrounded by this pressure cooker of tension. "But what I can do is stop believing that things must stay broken. I've let you haunt my life for too long. I'm not afraid of you anymore." There was an urgency in David's words that resonated with Jake. They were spoken as a father who had finally uncovered who he truly was, despite the past. His father's expression morphed, surprise dancing at the edges of his features. There, bathed in the soft light of the uncertain day, was the ghost of the man he wanted to be. "Is this your moment of bravery?" his father challenged, the edge of anger still simmering. "You still think you know everything, David." "I don't know everything, but I'm learning," David replied, his voice steady. "I'm ready to own my journey, and that includes confronting you, a man who taught me what I didn't want to be." Jake shifted beside him, crossing his arms as if drawing strength from his dad's conviction. He was getting it. Every moment of risk swirling around them created opportunities for dialogue. The cake remained a metaphor, a silent witness to breakthroughs that transcended layers of hurt. In the silence that followed, David found himself reconsidering not just the struggle with his father, but the power of his resolve. Was he ready to make his next move and step into the unknown? Was he prepared to show Jake that vulnerability and courage were intertwined? With uncertainty crackling, David prepared to make a daring choice that could reshape everything, a visceral confrontation that could lead him to either liberation or further entrapment. It was not just about the past, but how the past shaped what was to come. "Dad, what do you think happens next if we keep trying to hold on to old pains?" David asked, meeting his father's eyes, a challenge resonating between them. The answer lurked in the atmosphere, heavy and unspoken, as the winds of change gathered strength for the storm to come. The stillness of the kitchen was shattered when David's father let out a harsh laugh, the sound echoing against the tiled walls and mingling with the aroma of vanilla and buttercream. Old pains? You're the one clinging to whatever fantasy you think you're living in, David. David clenched his fists, feeling the tension radiate from his core. The space between them felt like a battlefield, and he was done being a victim of his father's voice. "I'm not here to reconcile a fairy tale," he asserted, resolve sharpening his words. "I want to talk about reality, about who we truly are." As he spoke, he felt Jake shift. His son's brow furrowed, an honest reflection of confusion and concern. This exchange was meant to empower, yet it was fraught with risks. David took a deep breath, striving to balance the need for transparency with the instinct to protect Jake. "Jake," he said, kneeling to meet his son's eyes, "I want you to understand that you have the power to break cycles. You don't have to repeat mistakes." He searched for a glimmer of understanding in his son's gaze, desperate to see the seed of knowledge taking root. "Like baking?" Jake asked, adventure creeping into his tone despite the heaviness in the room. "Yes," David smiled, a fleeting moment of warmth breaking through the temperature of confrontation. "You have the choice to try different combinations, to adapt when things don't seem right. That's the courage I want you to have." His father scoffed, his irritation palpable. "And you think talking about baking will fix the mess this family is in? You're deluded. Life isn't that simple." The rebuttal stung, a reminder of the many conversations that had spiraled into futility under his father's harsh criticism. But this time, David pushed back. "No, it's not simple, but it's a starting point. All I'm asking for is a chance to change, to find our way back to something real." The stakes continued to escalate within him, a tempest of fear and hope. What did it mean to change a family tree marked by resentment? Each moment stretched before him, laden with potential. He had begun this journey at the oven, intending to whip up a simple confection, but it had morphed into a crucible for deeper truths. As if sensing the shift in energy, his father's demeanor faltered. "You think you can win me over with metaphor?" he asked, the antagonism wavering slightly. "This isn't some self-help book. It's our lives at stake." "Exactly." David's voice built momentum. "Our lives. When we let old wounds dictate our actions, we lose sight of who we can be." His fingers grazed the edge of the mixing bowl, and in that tiny gesture he sought to ground himself against the winds of doubt swirling around him. For a brief moment, David felt the tension encapsulated by the cake, the transformative potential held in the mixing of different ingredients. Like life, baking was an unpredictable dance of flavor, trials, and the unpredictable effect of heat. He dared to hope that his family could forge a new recipe, one that included honesty, understanding, and a path away from bitterness. Jake's small voice punctuated the charged air. "Can we try again? With the cake?" "Yes," David breathed, holding his son's gaze. "Just like the cake, we can use every mistake, every burnt layer as a lesson." His father stood planted, arms crossed, but the intensity of David's words seemed to ricochet off the walls around them, a challenge layered in sincerity. "So tell me," David pressed, slowly drawing his father's expression into focus, "what do you want your legacy to be? What flavor do you want to leave behind?" As silence enveloped the room once more, the weight of David's question loomed large, ready to be addressed. It was a moment that could lead to liberation from generational burdens, yet one that carried the potential for even deeper rifts. Would his father finally break the silence that burdened their past? Or would his cynical armor seal off any chance of reform? The unspoken truth hovered just within reach, leaving everyone waiting on the precipice of an uncertain future. The silence stretched on like a taut wire, vibrational tensions humming in the air. David could feel the weight of his father's indecision, as if it were a palpable entity, thickening the atmosphere. Jake's inquisitive gaze darted between the two men, like a pendulum swinging between conflict and resolution. David wanted to shield him from the fallout, but he also needed to expose the truth that lay hidden beneath layers of resentment. Can we really change? The question broke from David's lips before he realized the depth of what he was asking. What if, after all this effort, nothing shifted? What if his father remained encapsulated in bitterness, never tasting the sweetness of possibility they once had? David felt that familiar rush of fear clutching at his insides, a specter whispering doubts that had haunted him for years. But he wasn't that frightened boy anymore. He had spent too long in the shadows of doubt, letting his father's scorn dictate his self-worth. Standing firm, David cleared his throat, feeling a surge of determination rise within him. This isn't just about you or me, it's about Jake, about giving him the chance to create his own future. With a shrug, his father dismissed David's earnest plea. You think he needs your lessons on mixing ingredients? Life is different, David. It's harsh, unforgiving. His voice was cold, a block of ice that chilled the warmth David wished to cultivate. Life is whittled down by the choices we make, David countered, the words flowing from a vein of newfound conviction. Making that cake today, trying again after failure, that's real. Isn't that worth celebrating? He felt empowered, each word a step towards dismantling the fortress his father had built around him. Underneath all the frustration, maybe there was a crack in their facade. David focused on that glint of possibility, hoping it could ignite something. Can I try? Jake piped up, again the voice of innocent hope. We can fix the cake together. In his son's whimsical suggestion, David felt fresh air pouring into the room, dispelling the heavy shadows. That was it. Jake was the bridge they needed. Perhaps through his joy, they could navigate this tangled landscape. His father, however, remained stony, refusing to engage. Can't you see? Even this, he gestured disdainfully towards the baking mess, is destined to fail. The challenge burned within David, urging him onward. Was his father so embroiled in despair that he could no longer see the beauty in mistakes? Perhaps it was time to lay even more at the altar of honesty. And if it does, David pressed, leaning closer. What lesson remains? Isn't it worth the chance to discover something new together? A flicker crossed his father's face, a moment of reflection embedded within defiance. David seized the moment, brimming with the raw energy of possibility. Could he, with sheer will alone, lift the weight of cynicism off the family's shoulders? Every recipe has its failures, David insisted, but it's also a testament to our willingness to adapt. He gestured towards Jake, whose excitement was palpable, a small beacon of courage amidst the turmoil. We're breaking cycles here. It doesn't have to be a perfect cake, it just needs to be an honest attempt to understand each other. Life isn't so conveniently stitched together, his father countered, but the edge in his tone had softened. No, it's not, David responded, his heart racing as he sensed a shift. But we're the ones who can sew it back together, not through avoidance, but through engagement, through being real. Jake's small hand intertwined with David's, a gesture of unity that momentarily dispelled the grim atmosphere. The cake had become a metaphor, a means of forging something beyond mere sustenance, real connection, healing, a celebration of resilience over bitterness. As David searched his father's eyes for some glimmer of understanding, he knew the stakes were high. This was not just a culinary experiment. It was a chance to redefine their legacy. He felt raw determination swell within him, a growing belief that they could shape their future together. But the implications were vast, and David understood that this would not come without challenge. While he hoped for some sign of acquiescence, the walls built over years were not easily toppled. What do you really want from this moment? He asked again, intensity filling his voice. And at that very moment, the question loomed heavy, hanging in the air. Would his father respond, or would silence seal their fates yet again? David braced himself for the answer that would either catalyze change or cement their painful reality even further. The clock was ticking toward a new dawn, or perhaps a lingering dusk. The air in the kitchen thickened with tension, each breath carrying a heavy anticipation. David could see his father's lips pinched into a thin line. The muscles in his jaw tightened, a clear signal of resistance. Yet within that stoic demeanor, there was a hint of something else. Was it doubt? "Do you really think this matters?" His father's voice sliced through the silence like a knife. "What do you hope to achieve by playing house with cake frosting and flour?" David felt the heat rising in his cheeks. He had to resist the urge to retreat back into the shadows of his past. "It matters, because it's not just about the cake. It's about showing Jake that trying is where real growth happens." The words poured from him, a dam breaking under the pressure of years of bottled frustration. Try and fail, his father parroted, each word laced with scorn. What a wonderful lesson to teach a child. In that moment, the old resentments resurfaced, an echo of childhood insecurities and emotional stings that refused to fade. But David forced himself to stand tall. "No," he said firmly, his voice unwavering. "It's about resilience. Just like life, we don't get it right the first time, or even the second. But it's in those attempts we find strength." David took a step forward, each heartbeat drumming louder than the last, filling the silence with palpable hope as Jake's bright eyes took in the exchange. "Adjusting and recalibrating is how we learn," he continued, his gaze locked onto his father's. "We don't shy away from mistakes, we embrace them. Isn't that worth teaching?" The flicker of uncertainty in his father's eyes widened for a split second, but it vanished as quickly as it had appeared. "You think you're some kind of expert? Your baking skills aren't even remotely impressive, let alone meaningful." The sting bit deep, yet it invigorated David, adding fuel to the fire of his conviction. That's the point. It's not about being an expert. It's about openness to discovery, to redefining who we are in every step of the process. Letting Jake make a mess is hardly responsible parenting. The voice remained unyielding, acidity lacing the words like an unwelcoming embrace. David closed the gap, the fear of rejection replaced by determination. What's irresponsible is letting bitterness be a legacy. Why are we stuck in this cycle of negativity? It's suffocating. He lowered his voice slightly. "You're capable of more than this narrow view, Dad. I know you are." A moment of stagnant air passed, the three of them suspended in their own emotional arenas. David felt his heart racing. This was it, either a breakthrough or a disheartening retreat, and with every passing second, he felt the weight of the years pressing down. Was it possible that, just by baking a simple cake, they could tackle life's deeper complexities together? Jake chimed in again, his small voice cutting through the heaviness. "Can we just bake? I want the cake, and I want to fix it with you both." David's father shot Jake a glance, surprise briefly riding the waves of his hardened demeanor. For a flickering heartbeat, the old man appeared vulnerable, a man uncertain who had been hiding behind walls, fortified with decades of bitterness and disappointment. Would he push through the barriers standing between them, or would fear imprison him once more? David sensed the currents shifting, and each passing moment left them hanging at the precipice of change. "What will it be, Dad?" David asked, his pulse pounding in his ears. "Will you take a step toward something new?" As his father's eyes shifted, a myriad of emotions tangled within him. The silence thickened once more, but this time it was different. The stakes for each man were unveiled, and the question hung, unresolved and tantalizing. What chance might they take together? And could the baking truly become a turning point in their fractured relationship? The stillness in the kitchen crackled with unspoken words, each second dragging like an eternity. David's heart threatened to leap from his chest as he watched his father's brow furrow deeper, the silence heavy with indecision. Jake tugged on David's sleeve, his youthful exuberance a stark contrast to the gravity weighing down the room. "Please, Dad," Jake pleaded, eyes wide with desperate hope. And then it was as if a crack formed in the years of stone that encased his father. The old man hesitated, and for the first time, David caught the shimmer of vulnerability behind his father's hardened facade. I don't want to see you fail. No one wins right away, David breathed, his own tone softening, a subtle invitation for shared experience rather than confrontation. That's what makes this worthwhile. We're here for each other. With a flicker of uncertainty lingering in his eyes, his father finally nodded. The sigh that escaped his lips was almost a release, a softening of the previous tension. David could feel the atmosphere shift, the three of them bound together by this tenuous thread of ambition. Okay, his father finally said. Let's bake. David's heart soared. The simple act of baking a cake became an emblem of hope, a promise of togetherness that could pierce through their rigid histories. They set the ingredients on the counter, flour spilling slightly, as Jake hopped up onto a stool. The anticipation transformed into warmth, filling the room with a strange blend of familiar smells and newfound excitement. As they measured ingredients, the rhythm of teamwork eclipsed the previous resentment. David found himself smiling, directing Jake on how to crack the eggs without shells littering the mixing bowl. In those small lessons, beauty unfolded, not just in the cake they would eventually bake, but in the trust being rebuilt between 3 generations. Dad, can you hold the bowl while Jake pours the flour? David asked, his tone light, free of any confrontational undertones. His father grumbled under his breath, but obliged, and despite the walls that had once seemed insurmountable, there was a moment of connection. As flour cascaded into the bowl, light dust settled on their arms, marking them with proof of their messy endeavor. But it wasn't without bumps. The batter turned out lumpy, sloshing over the sides of the bowl. David's father grunted in frustration. Look at this mess, he said, scrunching his nose at the inconsistent mixture. Just like life, David reiterated, grabbing a spatula with a grin. Let's adjust. With each comment, an internal surge pushed David. More than cooking, he was cultivating long-existing aspirations, softening the rigidity of his father's convictions. In the laughter that escaped Jake's small mouth and the way his father's expression lightened, David began to find hidden territories within himself. Okay, what's the next step? Jake asked, eager, as the cake began to take shape. Next we bake it, David replied, a sudden realization piercing through him. Mom always said it was the waiting that taught us patience. For the first time in years, the reminder of his mother didn't sting but inspired, invoking a sense of belonging and shared legacy that transcended the bitterness of the past. David adjusted his stance, feeling stronger, more confident than ever. Perhaps this time he was not just helping Jake learn lessons of life. He was redefining his own understanding of family. Isn't it amazing what we can create together? He mused aloud, catching his father's gaze. Yeah, his father replied, a softer note in his voice, and just like that, another tiny crack chipped away as they all awaited the cake to rise. With mere minutes left until the smells would fill the kitchen, David felt a hot rush of purpose. It was about more than just the cake. It was about transformation. Standing together, ingredients mixed and whispers of hope curling around them, David realized he was on the cusp of forging a new path. Could this unexpected journey into baking truly lead to a new beginning? What more would they discover in the journey ahead? And as the oven timer counted down, could the past still prove to be a bitter memory waiting to be sweetened? As the kitchen timer beeped, punctuating the air like a subtle announcement, a wave of anticipation washed over David. The cake had risen beautifully, its golden top inviting them to take a closer look. He opened the oven door, the warm, sugary scent wrapping around them like a cozy blanket. In that moment, as he shared a glance with his father, David felt a flicker of hope illuminate a path he hadn't been sure existed. Let's cool it off before we dig in, David suggested, glancing at Jake, who was practically bouncing in place. The boy's enthusiasm sparked something in David, a determination to not squander this moment of connection. It wasn't just about baking anymore. It was about building bridges, reclaiming lost ground. As they set the cake on a cooling rack, David turned to his father. "What do you think? Can we make this a thing? Baking together, maybe on weekends?" His father's brow furrowed slightly, uncertainty creeping back. I don't know. What if it doesn't go right next time, like today?" "All part of the experience," David countered gently, feeling the familiar mix of apprehension and resolve. The weight of those past years, silence, resentment, and misunderstandings, hung in the air, but today felt different. They had taken a first step, tiny yet significant. His father's gaze darted toward Jake, who went on animatedly about frosting colors and sprinkles. It was as if a mural of innocence and joy stained the canvas of their past. The older man sighed, a deep well of emotion surfacing before he spoke again, this time softer. "You're right. It's about the process, not just the end result." "Exactly," David replied, emboldened. He could feel a shift taking place, a subtle breaking down of walls brick by brick. It's like life, messy, unpredictable, but worth it. As they cleared the workspace, David caught himself daydreaming about the future, what they could do together. Would they create new recipes, share kitchen disasters, formulate plans beyond these walls? Suddenly, he was drawn back to the weight of their collective history, the unspoken grievances and tension waiting for resolution. Shadows of his brother's envy loomed over that dream of future family gatherings. Just last week, a passing comment had left a bitter taste in David's mouth, a reminder that not all was well in their family dynamic. Jake's voice interrupted his thoughts. "Can I help with the icing?" "Of course," David replied, trying to dispel the darker thoughts hovering at the edges of his mind. While Jake enthusiastically mixed and applied frosting to the cake, David watched his father, the lines of time and worry etched onto his face. In this small moment, he felt a pang of responsibility, not just for his son, but for his father too. "Dad," he began hesitantly, the words forming in his throat. "I know we've had our disagreements, but I want to try and understand your fears for Jake. I want to help him succeed, just like you did for me. Can we talk about it?" The air thickened with the invitation as his father hesitated, the fight slipping from his posture. Yet there was an undeniable tension, a fortification against vulnerability instinctively established over years. "I don't want him to get hurt," he finally admitted, regret pausing his voice, as if the truth itself had been locked away. David felt his heart race. A flicker of connection ignited. What if we did this together? Show him that it's okay to try, to fail even. His father looked away, the weight of emotion causing him to blink rapidly. "I don't know if I'm ready for that." "Maybe then we just start small," David proposed. "How about we plan something together for next weekend? Something special with Jake? Something to reinforce that it's okay to take risks?" They stood there for a moment, the air alive with possibilities and uncharted territory. The frosting-covered cake sparkled enticingly, begging for a taste. As Jake bit into the cake, his eyes widened, bliss radiating from him. This simple mix of flour, sugar, and eggs had opened doors David had long thought closed. "Next time, we're going to make a 3-layer cake," Jake declared, gnawing on a piece. David nodded, a small smile creeping across his face, even as uncertainty loomed at the edges of this newfound peace. His father grunted before allowing a slight grin, eyes softened with vulnerability. "Yeah, we can do that," he finally agreed, as if daring to step forward into a brighter, if still uncertain, future. Yet beneath this budding optimism lingered questions that haunted David. Would their efforts withstand the challenges of the past? And with his brother's unresolved jealousy casting a shadow, was the path they had just begun to grace truly sustainable? He couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that the hardest trials lay ahead, and as the sweet taste of victory mixed with lingering fears, he pondered, would the next cake be a sweet success, or a bitter reminder of what could still tear them apart? The morning light streamed through the kitchen window, illuminating flour dust motes dancing in the air. David rubbed the remnants of the night's anxiety from his eyes as he observed Jake and his father snickering over their latest baking endeavor, a 3-layer cake that loomed proudly on the counter. The playful laughter buzzed in the air, but David felt a dissonance within him. Was it too simple to believe this moment could sustain their fragile connection? The question lodged itself in his mind as he scrutinized every laugh shared, worrying that the nostalgic echoes of laughter might falter at the first sign of conflict. After all, looking back at his past with his father brought forth a myriad of unresolved issues. This seemingly innocuous moment felt like a tenuous thread, ready to snap at any moment. "Can we put more sprinkles on it, Dad?" Jake's voice floated through the haze of David's thoughts, prompting him to focus. The vibrant enthusiasm radiating from his son ignited something in David, a desire to guard this child's innocence and to find a pathway through the snarled thicket of adult grievances. "Sure, buddy, let's go wild," his father responded, a hint of mischief twinkling in his eyes. As Jake busied himself reaching for the second jar of sprinkles, David felt the weight of the day press upon him. He envisioned their weekend plans, a series of activities carefully crafted to foster connection. But would they truly serve as stepping stones, or merely serve to inflate the precarious bubble they had begun to build together? "Dad, can we think about what we could bake next?" Jake chirped excitedly, snapping David out of his reverie. "Like something with chocolate?" "Chocolate sounds great," David replied, forcing enthusiasm into his voice. His heart tugged, though, as he considered the underlying tension still hanging like a cloud over them. Their flour-dusted triumph felt like a thin facade against the unresolved resentments lurking just underneath. "Maybe we should try to make a chocolate soufflé one day," David's father chimed in, his interest piqued. David paused, feeling his pulse quicken at the phrase, "one day." The possibility hung heavy between them, the tension palpable. This was the moment where courage dwelt, a chance to confront the uncertainties lining their discussions. He knew that the deeper issues wouldn't simply dissolve into sweet batter and sprinkles. They had to be addressed. "Can we make it a goal for next weekend?" David proposed, the request rolling off his tongue with a hint of calculated determination. "I mean a real commitment." His father's face hardened momentarily, shadowed by the memory of pain. "You want to put pressure on it? What if it fails?" "No, not like that," David replied, attempting to infuse confidence into his words. "But we need to talk things through, Dad. Like, why you're afraid for Jake, what weights you carry. There's more at stake here, more than cakes or recipes." A tense silence filled the kitchen, the air seeming to thicken. "I just don't want to relive my mistakes," his father finally whispered, the weight of vulnerability interested in their conversation. "I want Jake to have better than I did, better than you did." "And I get that," David responded. While fear loomed large over the room, he recognized his father's protective instinct as a veil for deep-seated regrets. "But we can't shield him from life. He's too clever not to try things out for himself. He needs to explore, to fail occasionally, just like we have." "It's scary, David." His father's voice quivered, yet there was recognition in his eyes. "What if things go wrong?" "What if they do? Isn't that how we learn?" David countered, aware he was walking a tightrope of encouragement and vulnerability. He felt the ground solidify beneath his efforts for the first time. There was an understanding that they could foster together, an understanding derived not just from success, but resilience. As Jake tinkered with the sprinkles, blissfully unaware of the weight cradled in their conversation, David and his father shared a look, a flicker of growth, an understanding shared. Perhaps the cake was more than a sugary delight. Perhaps it was the catalyst for change. But was this newfound resolve genuine enough to withstand future storms? As David contemplated, unease settled deeper into his gut. The revelation had taken root, and he felt ripe with the fear of the unknown that lay ahead. What would Jake's experience of failure look like? Could they truly navigate this delicate path together, or were they merely glossing over tensions that would soon resurface? With questions spiraling in his mind and uncertainty clouding their reach, David's grip tightened around the moment. He understood this was the brink of something significant, a turning point. Yet, the path turned treacherous in David's heart. Would they embrace it? Or would it unravel and reveal those dark, festering wounds that still pulsed beneath the surface? Next weekend loomed near, pregnant with promise and potential. But the weight of history bore down, intensifying the call of their fragile connections. As he picked up a sprinkle jar, David knew. Not every layer of their cake would prove sweet, but he was determined to uncover the deeper truth beneath the icing. The question echoed in his mind, punctuating the kitchen's warm, sweet air. Were they ready to taste this new journey, or would the next slice reveal a bitter edge they couldn't swallow? Days turned into weeks, and weekends together became a ritual, infusing life into David's and his father's strained relationship. Each baking session revealed layers of vulnerability and resilience. The kitchen transformed from a space of tension to one filled with laughter, experimentation, and a new understanding of one another. These were the moments David had envisioned, the threads of connection woven through flour and sugar. The cake they had made that first day became a symbol of rebirth, with each subsequent dessert they crafted pushing boundaries of their past interactions. David basked in the warmth of his father's laughter, moments previously absent, now abundant. Conversations flowed more freely. They discussed not just baking techniques, but also their fears and aspirations. Individuals who had once been trapped in each other's shadows were starting to emerge into the light. "Let's try something ambitious this weekend," David proposed, excitement buzzing in the air. "How about we tackle a croquembouche?" His father raised an eyebrow, a playful grin stretching across his face. "You mean that French pastry that defies gravity? I suspect someone is getting bold." "Exactly. It's a challenge we can tackle together," David encouraged, his tone a blend of urgency and camaraderie. "It's the very definition of resilience. If one part fails, we can rebuild it. Then let's get started." His father's agreement, once a rarity, now felt effortless. The kitchen buzzed with renewed energy as they gathered ingredients. David opened the oven, remembering his early fears when he had first invited his father into this space. This time, the air hummed with possibility, each task a reminder that they could reshape their history. In the weeks that followed, they navigated flops and triumphs alongside Jake, whose laughter filled every corner. Layers of cream and pastry were interspersed with moments of connection, the real conversations that David had long desired. "Dad, why did you always think I wouldn't be a good father?" David found himself asking one afternoon as they munched on the remnants of the last cake. His father paused, shadows flickering across his face. "Because I was too busy not believing in myself to believe in you," he replied at last, a note of remorse lacing his voice. "I thought keeping you at arm's length would somehow protect you, but I see now how wrong I was." David absorbed his father's candid admission like a sponge, gratitude swirling within him. The emotional barriers were slowly eroding, exposing a foundation of mutual understanding and empathy. They were no longer just baking cakes. They were crafting a future based on openness, a shared acceptance of the past. In their final baking session before the bake sale of the year, they were working on their pièce de résistance. David watched his father with a sense of deep satisfaction. Together, they mixed and whisked gleefully, sharing inside jokes that only they understood. They presented their grand croquembouche at the bake sale, a monument standing tall among the other offerings. As attendees admired their creation, David felt an overwhelming rush of achievement flood his senses. It wasn't just the cake. It was everything they had rebuilt together, the acknowledgement of struggles, miscommunication, and regeneration. The reactions from the crowd were gratifying. People marveled at the craftsmanship, praising the intricate layers and decadent flavor. Yet, amidst the applause, there was a singular moment when David locked eyes with his father. Each pair of eyes reflected what words could not convey: the respect earned, the connection rebuilt, and the legacy evolving before them. Jake bounced with joy beside them, eyes wide as they absorbed the admiration. "We did it, didn't we?" he exclaimed, beaming pridefully between them. "Yes, we did," David answered, feeling solid confidence expand within. "And we're just getting started." The realization that his family was thriving settled warmly within him. An unshakable sense of belonging and clarity about his own abilities, not just as a father, but as a man ready to confront the past without fear. It was a transformation born from commitment, not just to baking but to the relationships he held dear. As he took in the scene, David understood he had conquered not just the fears of his father, but his own uncertainties. The standing ovation from their peers felt like recognition of all they had achieved together. David emerged from the experience rejuvenated and filled with deserved fulfillment, knowing he had claimed his place as an active participant in his family's story. The journey had molded him into a man who not only embraced imperfection, but celebrated it, cultivating a safe haven for mistakes and growth. This was his moment, a culmination of every defeated insecurity, every moment of bravery taken against doubt, shaping him into a proficient father and partner. And just like that, David stepped boldly forward, ready to embrace the complexities of family life with newfound confidence. As the buzz of excitement surrounded them, he felt his heart race, not with fear, but with the thrill of looking ahead. Now was the time. You need to subscribe now to ensure you are part of more extraordinary journeys like this one. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and let others enjoy these transformations. Comment your reactions and theories about this heartwarming conclusion. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this triumphant tale of renewal. Don't wait even one more second to share. Your voice matters in lifting the stories that resonate with us all.